discussion that I made was about anti-NMDA encephalitis, which is an example of an autoimmune CNS problem. So it's not really an infection, but it's a close differential. So I think it's very important that I discuss it because it's a close differential for your viral encephalitis. And I think it's very nice to for the students to know the anti-NMDA encephalitis. So without further ado, I will just watch for now and then I'll ask questions later as we go on. So from Contreras to De Leon, you can start with your presentation. Sorry, I can't hear anything.
Hello po, naririnig po ba ako?
Now I can hear you now.
Okay po. So, good morning everyone. We're Group 7 of Block A and today we will discuss case number 7 which is about central nervous system infections. Next slide please. So, presented in the slide, balik na lang po muna sa may outline. Papakita ko lang saglit. Yung previous slide po. So, ito po yung outline ng presentation namin. And let's start po by proceeding sa identifying data at chief complaint. Next slide po. So the patient is a 34-year-old male, right-handed, with no known comorbidities, and the informant is the patient's sister, with to which she has fair reliability. So the chief complaint is headache of 5 days duration. Next slide, please.
So for the HPI, sorry, previous slide, yes. So 5 days prior to admission, headache was graded 6 out of 10, characterized as heavy pressure-like, and was located over the right temporooccipital area with radiation to the nape. The patient took paracetamol 500 milligrams per tab, one tablet every 6 hours, which gave partial relief. No other symptoms were present and no consultations or interventions were done. 4 days prior to admission, the headache continued and was remittent. Episodes of undocumented fever and chills were also noted, occurring more frequently at night and became associated with the headache. He also noted a decrease in appetite and activity. Next slide, please. So 3 days prior to admission, symptoms were now accompanied by pain and rigidity over the back and the neck. He also noted 2 to 3 episodes of vomiting, both non-projectile and projectile, which consisted of previously ingested food amounting to half a cup to 2 cups in volume per episode. The patient reported that the vomiting provided partial relief of his headache. He then saw consult at a clinic and was diagnosed with GERD. He was advised to continue paracetamol and was sent home with antacids and omeprazole. However, this did not alleviate his symptoms. 2 days prior to admission, his headache was now 8 out of 10 in intensity with the same character and location. He also noted episodes of disorientation and forgetfulness, where the patient would forget what he was doing and where he was. His family members noticed an increased sleeping time, and the patient would only be awake for meals. This then prompted consultation, and he was advised admission.
Okay, so before we continue to the past medical history, can we go back to the HPI? So can we flash it a bit since the start? Okay, so I want the group to digest the HPI, no? Or also even the other students that might be able to answer. So as you can see, 5 days prior to consult, it's just the usual headache, diba? So at that point, do you think warranted na ma-admit yung pasyente? Or is it warranted or for the patient to be admitted at that time? So maybe not, right? 4 days prior to admission, you might tick it off to just the usual run-of-the-mill viral infection. So maybe not. Why am I doing this? Because I want us to learn from the mistakes of others. No? I'm not sure if this is a real case or not, but can we go to the next slide? So this one, very important. Sige, I'll ask Gerald since you're the one who presented. 3 days prior to admission, you have a patient with pain and rigidity over the back and neck, 2 to 3 episodes of vomiting. So at that point, 2 days na siyang may headache. He has headache for 2 days already. Would you think that at this point in time, you would have done different? Because the patient was sent home at this time.
Sorry, but what was the question?
So the question is, if you were the attending physician, because I want you to imagine yourselves as the attending physician. At this point in time, 3 days prior to admission, would you admit or would you do anything different from what the original physician did?
I think I would further evaluate his symptoms, because he had fever and chills 4 days prior. So if you combine that and then pain and rigidity over the back of the neck and vomiting, I feel like this would point to signs of meningitis rather than GERD.
Yes, so exactly, So why am I doing this? Because I want us to learn from other people's mistakes because we're in training. Looking back in retrospect, everything is clearer in retrospect. But if you notice, it's not usual already. Pain and rigidity over the back and the neck. I always remember when you become general physicians, when in doubt and there is something different to this patient, because maybe at the onset, maybe I would forgive you if you didn't had an inkling that this might be more serious. But at 3 days prior to admission, for me, uh, this have warranted an admission for this patient. Why is it important? Of course, better prognosis if you catch it earlier, better for the patient, so and lesser chance of problems also for you as future doctors. So yun lang yung gusto kong emphasize dito. Kasi 2 days prior to admission talagang you have to admit that your patient has episodes of disorientation, is relatively young, 34, forgetful at 34. Uh, sa medical students ko lang nakikita yung forgetful at this age. I'm just joking. Pero it's very serious at that point. And of course, decrease in sensorium because the patient was noted to have increased sleeping. Okay, so I just want to emphasize that. Can we go on? Thank you, Daryl. So we can go on to the next part.
Previous slide, please. Okay, so for the patient's past medical history, the patient has no known comorbidities. He has no history of previous hospitalizations or surgeries. He has no history of previous PTB infection or PTB treatment, and he has no history of repeated infections during childhood.
Dr.
Next slide.
Cueva, can I ask, no? What do you think is pertinent, an example of a pertinent positive for past medical history in a patient that, let's already mention it, no? Kunyari, CNS infection. No? So what is one example? No, wala siya, pero for example, if this patient has this certain condition, it might predispose to a CNS infection. From the top of your head, even without searching.
TB infection po, infection sa ear, upper respiratory tract infections po, and sa nasal, ay,
Yes.
upper respiratory.
Okay, so that's very good, no? Please take note of what Dr. Cueva said. Kasi, uh, ear infection, ano yan, high risk yan for CNS infection, recent nasal infection, normal sinusitis, uh, or run-of-the-mill common colds before they presented with symptoms of CNS infection, and of course, previous TB. But I just want to emphasize this that hindi porket, I'll use Tagalog, hindi porket wala kang history of TB, hindi ka pwede magka-TB meningitis. A lot of TB meningitis patients started in the brain, and we cannot detect any TB infection elsewhere. So that's always a possibility, especially in the Philippines. TB is still endemic. No? Pasensya na. We're all Filipinos here. Kahit may foreigner film dito, you're currently staying in the Philippines, so you're at risk of having TB, unfortunately. If while you're in the Philippines, it's very endemic. So please remember, di porket walang TB infection, wala nang chance of TB meningitis. But of course, if you have a history of PTB, you might really consider that, maybe high risk for TB. Okay? So let's go forward.
Moving on to the patient's family history, he has a history of breast cancer on the maternal side and lung cancer on the paternal side. There is no recorded history of hypertension and type 2 diabetes mellitus.
Okay, so for this patient presenting with headache, fever, neck rigidity, and altered mental status, the social history reveals an 8-pack-year smoking history, occasional alcohol use, and no illicit drug use. He reports a monogamous sexual relationship with a female partner and denies same-sex encounters.
Nia, before we continue, as parang kay Dr. Cueva, I would like to ask you a question. Parang, what in the personal or social history might increase the likelihood of, for example, a possibility of CNS infection?
Doc, I would consider if meron pong recent exposure with individuals with the same condition,
Of
like
course,
if this individuals has this fever and neck rigidity, yun po. Since infectious po siya.
bukod doon. Actually, nandito siya sa slide. It's glaring. So, anong mga certain conditions that may predispose you to infection? So that's a general question. Diba? We are assuming every one of us is immunocompetent. But what can make us immunocompromised with regards to our social history? So,
Doc,
can
maybe
yeah.
it's related to smoking, drugs, and alcohol. Basically, yung lifestyle po ng patient. Since
Okay,
smoking and these factors can significantly affect po yung condition ng patient and could lead to immunocompromise po.
okay. So, tama ka naman, pero I'm actually looking for a specific problem kasi this specific problem expands your differentials to possibility. So, meron kayang may alam sa group o kahit sa mga audience, the students. For example, if you have this diagnosis, fungal infection is a possibility. Actually, hindi lang naman yun. Marami. Sige, anong alam mo? So, mag, ano, one, kunan. So, and at the top of your head, without searching, what would you say? Naka-mute. O may mga nag-TM sa akin, pero magsabi kayo out loud. Ah, one, naka-mute ka. So, may apat naman nag-message, tatlo nag-message sa akin. Pero, PM, no? So, maybe you can say it out loud. For example, Jimenez, Hasin, and Tan, Julio. Yeah,
Hello po, Doc.
yan. Okay, try muna ni Juan.
Doc, one factor will be the immunocompromised state of one person po, Doc.
Yeah, kaya nga. Ano nga yung mga condition? Kasi
A-
already third year. I want specific disease conditions that can cause
HIV po,
immunocompromised.
Doc. It's just
Okay,
HIV.
okay. So, HIV, you have an HIV individual. Your differentials for CNS infection expands to fungal infection. Also, hindi naman lahat AIDS eh. Meron din mga IV drug use. Pero uncommon kasi sa atin yan, yung what we call it. Because in the States, heroin, direct to the IV kasi yan. So, sharing of needles can transmit AIDS. But also, uh, hindi lang sexually transmitted diseases na nagpo-cause ng immunocompromised state. For example, if you're a kidney transplant patient, what do they give kidney transplant patients? Steroids. So, patients with autoimmune disorders, they're given steroids, or those who undergone kidney transplant, they're given immunomodulators and steroids to lessen the chance of rejection of the new kidney. So they can be at risk for mga fungal infections. So that includes fungal CNS infection. Please do not forget that. Do not forget that. So social history in a patient with suspected CNS infection is one of the very important part of the history. Okay? Sige. We can continue.
Next slide, please. Okay, so based on the case on the review of systems, all systems were unremarkable except for the neurologic system where the patient reported headache as the chief complaint. Okay, next slide.
So moving on naman po to the physical exam. So most of it were found to be unremarkable maliban na lang po to the three that are highlighted on the screen. So the first one is the vital signs. So from the vital signs, the most notable was the temperature of the patient, which was around 38.9 degrees Celsius. Other vital signs were within the normal range. And then the next notable feature in the physical exam was the head, HEENT. Everything was unremarkable aside from the mention of the dry lips and the dry oral mucosa. And then the other notable area in the physical exam that was provided was the area of the extremity. So it mentioned that the patient also had dry skin, but other than that, it was also unremarkable. Other things that were not mentioned in the physical exam or pertinent negative according to the physical exam was the absence of any form of rash or the absence of any cervical lymphadenopathies.
For you, ano pa yung mga pertinent negative? Sige,
Um,
first, before we continue pala, what do you think of the dry lips or mucosa, dry skin? So,
I
fever given infection, right?
But I think with the dry lips, I think the patient is mildly dehydrated because there were no other signs naman of other forms, signs of dehydration like yung mga sunken eyes or yung skin turgor. Yun po, it was not mentioned, so it cannot be assumed also. So
Yes,
I
pero
maybe,
by history, what can cause, by knowing the history pa dun. So your
maybe
patient has, yeah, what happened to the
probably
patient?
yung sa headache niya din po or yung sa ay nag-vomit po pala si patient.
Okay. So yun yung very
Sorry.
glaring, Oo, siya. So, that can be, you can correlate that to your losses. So, ano pa yung very important kasi tinanong ko kanina sa past medical history, may ah, mga sabi ko tingin ni Dr. Cueva at mga pwede mag-cause or pwede maging high risk yung patient for CNS infection. Ano pa yung pertinent negative? I agree, lymphadenopathies, rash is very important, the negative. Pero uh, with the previous discussion, ano yung mga dapat nyo i-check talaga sa physical exam, sa general PE?
Like, if may hindi po na-include po dito sa PE,
Yeah. Actually, meron
ano,
dito isa yung no tonsillopharyngeal congestion. Kasi nga, di ba sabi ko, upper respiratory tract infection can cause predilection to CNS infection, especially recently. May na-mention si Dr. Cueva kanina, di ba? Ano yung naalala mo sa sinabi ni Dr. Cueva? That this simple disease can be, can cause CNS infection.
yung sa TB po ba, Dok?
Hindi. Sa ears. So, ear infection, So as simple as that. When you have a patient like this, you make sure that you do otoscopy. Why? If the patient has signs of repeated ear infection, then the likelihood that this is CNS infection increases. So don't forget your normal, general PE. It's very important also for us neurologists to do a complete PE so that we can ascertain if uh, this these symptoms are related to something that is very halata. For example, if you just do the otoscopy, find otitis media or otitis externa, then the likelihood of CNS infection increases. Okay, we can continue.
That's all na po for the
So moving on, we have the neurological exam findings, which will help establish the patient's baseline, detect abnormalities, localize lesions, guide diagnosis, and plan management. So for the MSE, the patient was drowsy with unsustained eye opening to repeated tapping, with incomprehensible verbal output and inconsistently follows commands. So these findings indicate that the patient has decreased or altered sensorium. For the cranial nerves assessment, the cranial nerve 1 was not assessed. Cranial nerve 2 revealed intact visual threat bilaterally and the fundoscopy of positive ROR with sharp disc margins and 1:3 cup disc ratio, AV ratio of 2:3 with no exudates or hemorrhages on both eyes. So, however, the visual acuity was not assessed. For cranial nerves 2 and 3, the pupils are 3 millimeters briskly reactive to light on both eyes, and there is intact direct and consensual reflexes, which reveals that nerves are intact. So cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6 also show intact DOS eye reflexes. However, the extraocular movements, convergence, and divergence were not assessed. Cranial nerve 5 showed intact corneal reflexes bilaterally, but however, they were also not able to assess the temporal and masseter bite, light, touch, pain, and temperature. For cranial nerve 7, no facial asymmetry noted during grimacing, but the voluntary movements such as eye closing, raising eyebrows, smiling, frowning, and puffing cheeks were not assessed. So for cranial nerve 8, the patient was able to localize sounds, which means that the gross hearing is intact. However, Rinne and Weber tests were not done. Cranial nerves 9 and 10 showed intact gag, equal palatal rise, and uvula midline. And cranial nerve 11 showed good SCM tone bilaterally. However, tone was only noted, the strength was not assessed. And for the last cranial nerve 12, tongue was midline with no atrophy or fasciculations. So some cranial nerves or part were obviously not tested or assessed, such as most of the MSE, olfactory nerve, visual acuity, extraocular movements, etc. This is likely because of the patient's altered sensorium, making him unable to follow commands or do voluntary actions. However, overall, it seems that the cranial nerves are intact. So for the motor and sensory exam, findings revealed that the patient had good muscle and bulk tone with no spasticity. There was also spontaneous movement of all extremities with no preferential movements, and he withdraws the pain on all extremities equally. Considering that the findings are unremarkable for these exams, it seems that upper and lower motor neuron lesions are unlikely. So this is also supported by the normal and symmetrical reflexes with +2 grading and no pathologic reflexes or clonus reported. Cerebellar exam was not performed, but usually this would include the stance and gait, finger to nose, heel to shin, rapid alternating movements, and tandem walk. And lastly, the meninges were also assessed, and findings revealed that there was positive nuchal rigidity, positive Brudzinski sign, and also positive Koenig sign. So this results in combination with the clinical history of the patient is highly suggestive of meningeal irritation. So in summary, for the neurological exam, revealed that the patient has altered sensorium. There's also intact cranial nerves, spontaneous symmetric movement of extremities, no focal weakness and spasticity, normal and intact sensory, normal symmetric reflexes with absence of pathologic reflexes and clonus, as well as positive meningeal irritation. So among these, the most pertinent findings in this case are the altered sensorium and meningeal irritation.
Okay, so as you said, when you have altered sensorium, medyo you can't do everything in the neurology. Pero most of it was done naman. With the limitation, they were able to do most of it naman. As you said, I noted that I agree, no? Meningeal irritation is talaga meron by the looks of it, or altered sensory. Sige, we can go on to your localization. Dito ako maraming tanong. Okay, so dito pa lang ayoko na. Bakit primary impression? You have to localize first where your vision is. Always in neurology, uh, you were under my supervision last year, correct? Correct? Baka hindi. So, ano ang sinasabi ko? Actually, dinamihan ko nga yung items natin for localization because I wanted to localize first. So, gusto ko spontaneous without looking at your notes, without looking at your gadgets. Where do you localize the lesion? Any one of you can answer. Doesn't
Ah,
matter.
Doc, sa meninges po.
Okay. Okay. I agree. Meron sa meninges. Bakit decrease yung sensorium niya? Anya? Pag meninges ba naapektuhan, mag-decrease sensorium mo agad?
Doc, we're discussing this din kahapon po because you're trying to figure out how to correlate. Pero, um, it would be, I think it would be due to the inflammation and the compression from the, um,
Yeah. Sige, I'll help you, Anya, ha? Do not overthink. Do not overthink. First,
okay.
meninges itself, pag affected yan, you can have a patient na awake. May meningeal irritation lang. Tama? So that happens. So, in case you don't know, that happened. No? But in this patient, very glaring, altered yung sensorium. We can all agree that it is an altered sensorium. So you have to remember what keeps us awake. What anatomic structure keeps us awake.
Yung, yung aras po.
Very good. So aras. So, saan ba may start ang aras? Okay, you can look at your notes or whatever. Kung hindi nyo maalala. Pero dapat at the top of your head, pag flirts kayo, tinanong ko kayo, alam niyo sa
Somewhere sa brainstem po, I'll...
Okay. So, habang hinahanap ni Anya, the ARAS is your ascending reticular activating system. So, it is a bundle of nucleus, usually starting from the brainstem, going up to the cortical area. Okay, that this is the structure that keeps us awake. So, when you have an altered, uh, may patient kayo na may altered sensorium, most likely your ARAS is affected. So, they are localizing in the meninges. I agree. Most likely doon nag-start. Kasi noong una, by history, wala kang sensorium problems. Later on lang siya din sa disease process nagpakita. Okay. Good. Ilalagay mo ba doon?
Yes po, Doc. Nasa ano lang po, nasa
Yeah.
after the lab
Hindi.
fiber.
No, kasi
Ay,
ayoko
sorry.
yan. So, sa mga next presenters, ayaw namin ng ganyan. Gusto namin may explanation agad, yung localization. So,
Okay.
hindi siya mapupunta doon sa dulong part. Okay. So, nasa na meninges, di ba malapit siya sa cortex? It's covering the brain. In layman's term, it's the protection for the bone. So, when you have kasi meningeal lesions, any type, subdural, hematoma, infection, you will have problems in the absorption of what, ano, what, what brain, what part of the brain, yung fluid. Ano tawag doon? Any one of you. Come on. I need, I need some participation from the group. Di lang si Anya. Sige, pero Anya, sige, anong fluid yung nasa brain?
Cerebrospinal fluid po.
Okay. So actually, may maraming types. Diba? Meron cerebrospinal fluid, may dugo, pero mostly sa CSF. So when you have meningeal lesions, your absorption of the CSF is not good, correct? So when you have a build-up of CSF, what could happen in the brain? Kasi hindi siya
Um,
na-absorb mabuti.
Mag-increase po
It's
yung
ICP.
and
Okay. So very good. So increase intracranial pressure. So if I would localize this lesion, I would say that the localization of this case is primarily in the meninges. Also by history, it supports it. At first, it was signs of meningeal irritation. But later on, due to the lesion in the meninges, it affected the ARAS indirectly due to the increased ICP. That's the localization. Okay? Kasi I always ask, eh, meninges, sige, ba't altered yung sensorium? There's always an explanation. So if you have, don't think about the disease primary expression first before you finalize the localization. Always finalize the localization, and from there, ano yung impression mo? Okay, so tinulungan ko kayo sa localization ha, pero dapat next time it should be more spontaneous, and you have to emphasize first anatomic localization, after anatomic localization, and then primary impression. Okay, so let's go back to the primary impression.
Hello, Doc. Ano audible po ba?
Back tayo sa primary impression.
Hello, Doc. Ano audible po ba?
Ha?
Naririnig po
Sorry.
ako. Sorry.
Yes po. Yes po.
Okay.
Medyo choppy lang.
Sobra. So, our group primary impression for this patient is acute bacterial meningitis. So, since the patient presented with the classic triad of meningitis, namely fever, nuclear rigidity, and altered mental status. So, nuclear rigidity is pathognomonic as meningeal irritation, and this was confirmed also by the positive Brzezinski and Koenig signs. Also, in addition, the patient also showed decreased level of consciousness, manifesting as lethargy and increased weakness. So, other common symptoms also of this disease include vomiting, decreased appetite, headache, and decreased activity. And then, um, next slide, please. To discuss the pathophysiology of the disease, let's start first with the infection. So, bacterial meningitis is commonly caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae and Neisseria meningitidis. So, these pathogens initially colonize the nasopharynx, and then they enter the bloodstream col- where they invade the bloodstream, invade
I have a question. Ba't hindi viral encephalitis? Or viral meningoencephalitis?
Actually, that would be discussed with the differential slide po sana.
Hindi. No, we can answer now. Kung sino man nag-prepare. Kasi this is what happens in actual practice.
Okay. We ruled out viral meningitis po because there is an altered mental status po with the patient.
Ano mas common sa viral? Anyone can answer. Anyone can answer. Anong common pag viral yung infection? Meningitis lang? O meningoencephalitis? I'm leading you. Meningitis lang? O meningoencephalitis? Anyone can answer. Kung sino man yung nag-prepare din sa viral different time. Anyone could answer.
Doc, pwede po pa-repeat ng question?
So the question is, sa viral infection in the brain, based on your readings, ano yung usual presentation? Meningitis lang per se or meningoencephalitis? Kasi remember, this patient presented cute. No? So I get it. Bacterial meningitis is your primary infection. Pero as a devil's advocate, bakit hindi siya viral? Bakit? So, I know that you prepared specifically prepared. Pero ayoko kasi ng gano'n eh. Gusto ko stimulate lahat ng audience, kayong group. Bakit hindi siya viral? Actually, agree ako. Mukhang bacteria ito. Pero may reason why ako nag-agree. Okay. What do you think, Dr. Custodio? First, you have to answer the question. Based on your reading, pag di alam, just tell me. Based on your reading, viral infection of the CNS, how does it usually present?
So based on my reading po, yung presentation po ng viral meningitis usually begins with symptoms ng viral infection. So may fever, vomiting, headache po.
Di ba
So,
meron din tong pasyente na yun? Yung pasyente natin meron din, di ba?
yes po.
Okay, so pwede, no? Pero bakit siya medyo hindi versus bacterial meningitis? Ano yung reason?
I think, Doc, yung altered mental status po kasi is more common talaga sa bacterial meningitis compared po sa
No,
viral.
no, that's not the answer. So, uh, sige, no? I'll help you, no? So, viral infection in the brain does not usually isolate itself in the meninges. Kung napansin niyo, in your reading, anong usual na term? Meningoencephalitis. Okay. Actually, mas common pa nga yung altered sensorium in my opinion sa viral infection. Pero bakit hindi ko iniisip na may encephalitis tong patient na to? Kasi kung may encephalitis siya, ganito, ganito makikita mo. So, Dr. Cruz, babalik ako sa inyo. Ano ba yung mga pwede mo makita sa encephalitis? Sorry guys ha, ayoko kasi yung, hindi, alam ko naman kailangan i-divide yung work. Pero gusto ko, lahat kayo, lahat sa group at least, hindi man yung audience, na iintindihan yung case as a whole. Na kahit sinong tanungin ko, nasasagot. Hmm. Anyone could help Dr. Cruz. No? Anyone? Anyone? Huwag kayo matakot sumagot. Mas gusto ko yung nagtitry kayo sumagot na mali kaysa sa walang sagot. Kasi ano, it tells me that the group, as a group, hindi isa walang makasagot. So, makatry sumagot.
Uh, sorry. You were asking po, how would I differentiate encephalitis po with
Yes, meningitis. Let's
meningitis?
start with that. Actually, that's not the question, pero more of anong signs yung makikita mo sa encephalitis. But okay, let's start with that. How do you differentiate between them?
Since encephalitis causes inflammation po with the brain parenchyma po itself. So there would be presentation po of focal neurologic deficits po and behavioral changes po.
Very good. Yun. No? So, kaya ako agree na bacterial meningitis. Kasi based on the pathology, the usual manifestations, encephalitis, a patient, kasi pwede kayo magkaano don't forget, you can have meningitis and encephalitis at the same time. No? But as you can see, uh, a description na usually sa viral infection of the brains, viral meningoencephalitis. Pag napansin nyo, may sinasabi bang acute bacterial meningoencephalitis, madalang. Pwede, pero madalang. Pero usually, kung na-apektuhan yung parenchyma, abscess. Pag, pag bacterial infection. So, kung viral kasi ito, baka mas nag-seizure siya, baka mas nagka-behavioral changes siya before. But as you notice, by the history, your patient presented with classic meningeal signs, and then later on, decreased sensorium. But the decreased sensorium is not specific for bacterial or so kaya nga more of purely meningeal problem to that cause increased ICP. And therefore, mas high likelihood ng acute bacterial meningitis. So remember, when I ask questions, when I interrupt you during the presentation, it's not because I don't agree. It's because I want to know why you thought about that. Kasi I am a board certified neurologist. No? Alam ko kung ano yung diagnosis na ito, kahit basa lang by history. Or what is the most probable diagnosis? But as students, I want to know kung paano yung process nyo, why you arrived at this, and trying to correct you and teach you with regards to how to correlate the data that you are given. Kasi remember, this data was not, hindi kayo nag-PE nito, hindi kayo nag-history. Kung ganito kayo mag-history at PE, madali lang discussion. Pero actually, the skill that you have to develop at this stage in your medical career is to get a very accurate history and PE so that wala kayo masyadong problem in formulating the diagnosis. But now I'm trying to make your process more efficient so that later on when you become doctors, you're more adept to handling clinical questions like this. Kasi this types of patient very dramatic. At you have to decide talaga and your process should be good because kunyari, maging doctors to the barriers kayo, makakita kayo ng ganito. At least alam ko na I trained you so that you can have a logical diagnosis. You can arrive at a logical diagnosis. Okay, it's okay. You can continue.
Okay, so inside the cerebrospinal fluid, so these bacteria rapidly multiply. And then eventually when they lyse, they release cell wall components. And then these cell wall components trigger inflammatory cytokines. So uh, this will now trigger a cascade of events such as altered brain barrier permeability. So this is when there would be leakage of plasma proteins into the CSF, so that would eventually cause vasogenic edema and then obstructive hydrocephalus. And then it could also cause adherence and migration of leukocytes. So the leukocytes would degranulate and then they would release toxic metabolites. So that would eventually cause cytotoxic edema and neuronal injury and then seizures. And then also there would be altered cerebral blood flow. So that's when ischemia could develop and it could also progress to stroke. And then also there would be production of excitatory amino acids or and radicals. So this would also cause injury and neuronal death. So from what I said po, the combination of vasogenic, cytotoxic, and the interstitial edema, it causes the increased intracranial pressure po. So that would explain the patient's symptoms such as the vomiting, the lethargy, the disorientation, and then we can say from here that the patient is at risk for progression to coma. And
Okay,
for the pathostation.
okay, we can continue.
So besides viral meningitis, we also considered tuberculous meningitis because the patient presented with headache, fever, vomiting, and altered mental status and notional rigidity, as well as positivity for Kernig sign and Brzezinski sign. However, TB meningitis is often associated with constitutional symptoms such as weight loss, night sweats, or a history of pulmonary tuberculosis, which were not noted in this patient, as well as the patient had a normal chest examination.
How about ano? How about historically? What could help you rule out TB meningitis bukod sa wala siyang history of TB by its temporal profile? Dr. Kunana.
Doc, pwede po ba yung sa fever at chills po?
I mean, temporal profile. When I say temporal profile, what do I mean? Based on the temporal profile, why is TB meningitis less likely?
Dahil po sa sudden onset din po nung symptoms po ng patient. Dahil po kapag TB po usually daw po, chronic course daw po siya.
When you say chronic in the sense of CNS infection, how many weeks specifically? Kasi may exact definition yan. Pag chronic, acute, subacute. So I
From
want
what
to
I
emphasize this for the audience.
From what I've read po, usually over a period po of a week daw po or two, and sometimes daw po longer pa.
Okay, so in the context of CNS infection, it's acute if it's less than 1 week. So would you say that our patient is acute
Yes po to.
with confidence?
Yes po daw.
Yes. Okay, correct. It's acute. Okay. So in the context of CNS infection, if it's less than 1 week, it's acute. If it's 1 to 2 weeks, it's subacute. If it's two weeks or more, it's chronic. No? So TB meningitis kasi usually chronic yan. So more than 2 weeks. So that's why temporality in suspected CNS infection patients is very important. Kasi in subacute CNS infections, mas marami yung possibilities actually. Na-explain ko later. Sige, we can go ahead with the discussion.
Next slide. Another differential that we considered brain abscess since the patient had a progressive localized headache with vomiting as well as altered mental status. Uh, However, brain abscess would also explain focal neurological deficits or seizures, but these were not noted in the patient. And the patient also had fever and nasal rigidity, which leans in more towards meningeal irritations rather than an isolated abscess.
And then lastly po, we considered subarachnoid hemorrhage as the patient presented with headache, vomiting, neck pain, and altered mental status. However, the headache in subarachnoid hemorrhage is usually described as a thunderclap headache or sudden and severe, reaching maximum intensity within minutes. So in this case, the patient's headache was described as heavy pressure-like pain.
Okay, so to tell you the truth, it's always a differential, but usually by the third day, comatose na yung pasyente kung sa arachnoid hemorrhage man. Ganun siya kabilis. Minsan nga, a day nila, patay na yung pasyente. No? Kaya nga very dramatic yung sa arachnoid hemorrhage. So, I think I would accept more pa nga fungal meningitis. No? Kasi you have to, when you do differentials, I understand it's difficult at your level. But you should present naman yung mga medyo closely related. Exhaust nyo muna yung mga ano, bago kayo mag-banggit ng sa arachnoid hemorrhage. And in my opinion, it should be logically, chronologically, and logically, ano siya, parang i-set nyo siya na logically from most probable to least probable. Why? Because if you do it like that, at least I can see how your thought process is. And I can give you insights and help you with regards to forming your differential. They, para maging neurologist ka, dapat at least 10 differentials na logically may sense and chronologically in order from most probable to least probable. Okay? Sige. You can continue.
So for the laboratory findings, as seen here in the plain cranial CT scan, it is unremarkable. Skull is hyperdense, brain parenchyma appears normal, and the ventricles are symmetrical. There are no presence of fractures, mass, or cerebral edema.
Can you point to me the ventricles? Can you zoom it in? So,
Hindi pa yung ano.
Okay, so that's just one. Lahat ng ventricles na mahanap mo, can you point at it para ma-review tayo? So, Johan or Dr. De Leon is pointing at it. Can we zoom? Kasi ano can we like maybe exit the presentation? Sorry guys, usi kasi ako eh. Kasi I want I want this session to be productive for all of us. Okay, so while Johan is figuring it out, so you have to remember when you have a patient like this with meningeal problem and probable CNS infection, you have to look at the CT scan closely. I always have a dictum that a clinician should not depend on the radiologist, that uh, we should confirm whatever the findings of the radiologist is. So what is very important when you have a patient like this, kasi your patient does not have focal deficit, correct? So medyo may headache siya, meron siya most probably meningeal irritation. So uh, most of patients with bacterial meningitis, hindi sila nagla-light up sa kahit contrast CT scan. Most. Medyo madalang kami makita talaga ng classic na may meningeal enhancement. No? So this is plain though. This is plain. Remember, this is plain. This image na pinagpakita. So lahat ng parts of the ventricle na makita mo in different cuts, point at it na di ako So what CSF is water. So it should be dark. Ayan. So when you have a patient like this with headache, meningeal irritation, you should look out for signs of hydrocephalus. So meaning, if the ventricles are enlarged. So you should know kung ano ang difference ng hydrocephalus na CT scan at normal. Hindi ba contrast eh? Parang contrast enhanced to. Plain talaga ito sabi. Johan. Plain yung label.
Okay.
Wala siyang contrast.
Oh, there's no problem.
Okay. So, yan nga, emphasize ko lang, look for signs of hydrocephalus. Kasi there are subtle signs of hydrocephalus. For example, if you see the temporal horns expanding, that's a sign of hydrocephalus. So, Johan, can you try to point at the temporal horn? Huwag kang, by memory lang, huwag kang tumingin sa internet. So, you have to find the temporal lobe. Saan niya yung cut na may temporal lobe? That's frontal. Taas ka. Okay. Okay. Sige. I will help you, ha? Okay. So, from this picture, from the second row, third column, can you focus on that cut? Second row, third column. See that? Wait. Masyado mabilis. Yeah, that cut sa kaliwa mo. Left of the cursor. Sino may cursor? Sa left. Yeah, okay. Now, the temporal horns is where? In that cut. Can you point at it? Can we try to point at it? Pwede ba yan? So, sino may cursor? Taas mo nga konti. Ito ba si Janro? Janro? Can you go right? Right pa.
Yes, okay.
Yung yellow. Yan. Baba ka, Janro. Baba. Baba. Dr. De Leon, baba. Yan, right.
Nice.
Right konti. Okay, sige. Yung katabi ng midbrain, di ba may nakita yan? May two lobes na katabi yung midbrain. So, anong lobe yan? Pagkatabi niya yung midbrain.
Mm. Temporal po?
Very good. Temporal lobe. So, yung black dot na yan, that's the temporal horns. Di ba meron dalawa? Sa left, sa right. Yung dalawang lobes. No? Na-imagine nyo ba? Actually, yun yun. Makikita nyo nga yung MCA. Yung dalawang MCA, we see it. No? So, sa baba ng MCA, you can see there's a parang slit. Yung dalawang slit sa left at sa right. That's the temporal forms. So usually, in a patient with normal, wala pang hydrocephalus, it's a slit-like, okay? Pero once you have hydrocephalus, that slit-like ventricle expands to parang bilog na sila. You're like a circular ring. Not that, not that, not that. Kanan pa. Sorry, I have kanan ka pa. Then taas. Sobrang subtle lang. Yan, yan. Can you see? Please,
Oh,
audience, na-effort namin ma-point. Okay. So that slit-like structure is your temporal horn. It should be slit-like in a normal individual without hydrocephalus. If you develop hydrocephalus, it expands to uh, para na siyang kama na malaki. Or pwedeng bilog na bilog siya. So that is a subtle sign of beginning hydrocephalus. So always look at that in a patient with possible CNS. Yeah. Sige, we can continue with the presentation.
okay, so next slide. Okay, so for the laboratory find for the cerebrospinal fluid studies, you can see the cerebrospinal fluid appears turbid. Normally, it should be clear and colorless. So turbidity suggests an increase in cells or protein, which points to an infectious process. There were no red blood cells present, and normally there should be zero. This means that the sample was not traumatic, and there is no hemorrhage. Also, additionally, there are also no pedicles seen. So, and the white blood cell count in the CSF was 1,500 per microliter. Normally, it should be less than 5 per microliter. So this means it is shows a marked pleocytosis. The differential count showed 84% neutrophils and 16% lymphocytes. Normally, CSF should have a lymphocytic predominance with very few neutrophils. So this
So just
neutrophilic
a correction. A
ay,
normal TSF is sterile. So wala.
ah,
So, okay,
okay, got
so just a correction, just to emphasize that. Normal CSF
okay.
is sterile, therefore no WBC. But sometimes, due to the technique, may nakukuha konting blood from the
Mm.
capillaries going in. So that's why sometimes it's allowed to have a bit negligible amount. That might be due to traumatic attack or traumatic lumbar puncture. So, Johan, sa nabasa mo, diretsuhan na kita. Ano usual dapat na findings pag bacterial meningitis?
Mm,
So, isa-isayin natin. I'll help you. WBC count is elevated, normal, or decreased?
elevated po.
Okay, very good. Protein, high, low, normal.
Increased protein.
Okay, very good. Increase. So, di ba sabi natin high WBC, what should be the differential count in a classic bacterial meningitis? Anong predominant na,
Neutrophils
na
po.
okay, so segmenters or neutrophils should predominate in a classic bacterial meningitis. Glucose, decrease, normal, or the
Decreased
same? Usually
decreased
decrease.
glucose.
Okay, so that's it. Ayun lang yan. That is the usual findings in your bacterial meningitis. Now,
Okay.
sometimes I just want to say if you have a patient, for example, who presented nag-antibiotic sila on their own. Marami yan, di ba? Nagsa-self-medicate antibiotics. That could affect your CSF. If you have a history of recent oral antibiotic use, you might have a falsely low WBC in the patient. Kasi nga, nag-antibiotic siya. And the shift might be lymphocytic predominance instead of the classic uh, WBC. So please, if your patient took oral antibiotics, that might be a source of bit, pampagulo dun sa CSF findings ng bacterial meningitis. So, can you go to the next slide? Okay, ito yung next question ko. Opening and closing pressure, what is normal? So, what is your reference na 6 to 25? Saan yun? Sa Adams ba yan? Kasi
Opo.
memorize ko Adams. Eh. Wala
Ay,
yan sa... So actually, if you look at Adams, it's 8 to 18 centimeter water. Pero sometimes we use millimeter water. So pag 8 to 18, ano siya, yung millimeter water.
ano,
So kung normal is 8 to 18 centimeter water, ano yung conversion niya into millimeter water? From cm to mm.
80 to, ano po, 180.
80. Very good. So you have to memorize that, 80 to 180 millimeter water or 8
8 to 18.
centimeter. May conversion pa yan sa
Opo.
millimeter mercury. Iba yun, ha? Don't
Opo.
forget. Iba yun. Okay, so, sorry, at the top of my mind, I cannot remember the conversion to millimeter mercury. So usually the tool that we use measure it with millimeter water. Yeah, very important that you know the conversion. Okay, so as you can see, sometimes patients with bacterial meningitis, kahit nag-gram stain mo na, hindi pa rin siya nagpa-positive. Pero for this patient, nag-positive siya. No? Okay, we can go to the next.
So based naman po on the complete blood count, there's marked leukocytosis with neutrophilic predominance which supports po yung findings sa CSF and is highly suggestive of bacterial meningitis. Then for the hematocrit and hemoglobin, the amount is within the normal range. So yung impaired oxygen supply sa brain is not hindi siya ini-include as a reason why the patient had drowsiness and anemia then for the headache. And for the basophil monocytes and stabs, we can exclude din po yung diagnosis of eosinophilic meningoencephalitis.
Okay.
That's all for
Actually, yung mga hindi CSF findings, medyo mahirap siya i-correlate diretso dun sa, siyempre sa CNS infection. But of course, it tells us a lot. For example, pag yung CBC more of viral in picture, might think, but it's not talaga solid. So for example, this patient, neutrophilic predominance, nakasimbawa disease, so major it points to bacteria. But sometimes your bacterial meningitis patient can have either normal or fine viral-like infection. So, syempre, the CSF will carry more weight versus yung CBC kasi peripheral yun. But for example, yung 150 na hemoglobin, technically normal, but it's a sign of dehydration. So the CBC can also tell you other things. Again, let's go on to the next one.
So for a more practical approach in localization, we start with the symptoms presented by the patient. So as mentioned earlier sa neuro exam, there are no signs of upper motor neuron or lower motor neuron lesions. You only presented with the classic triad of acute bacterial meningitis, yung fever, nuchal rigidity, and the change in mental status, which was sudden onset.
So after the nasopharyngeal colonization and bloodstream invasion, the bacteria attach to and penetrate to the endothelial cells of the blood-brain barrier. This early invasion of the central nervous system provokes meningeal irritation, making headache one of the first symptoms. In this patient, the initial manifestation was indeed a headache. According to Adams and Victor's Principles of Neurology, headache caused by meningeal irritation is due to the increase in intracranial pressure, dilatation, and inflammation of meningeal vessels, and chemical irritation of pain receptors in the large vessels and meninges.
And then bacterial multiplication then happens in the subarachnoid space containing the CSF, which is a nutrient-rich, low immune surveillance environment that allows the multiplication process. So rapid bacterial multiplication produces worse headaches, neck stiffness, nausea, and vomiting.
So the bacterial components may trigger release of cytokines and start an inflammatory cascade, which can drive tissue damage in the meninges. So once the inflammation is initiated, a series of injuries could occur to the endothelium of the blood-brain barrier that could result in vasogenic brain edema, loss of cerebrovascular autoregulation, and increased intracranial pressure. And like mentioned po earlier, the alteration in the level of consciousness of the patient or the abnormalities seen in his sleep cycle may be attributable to interruption on the ascending reticular activating system. So, some examples could be like the increase in intracranial pressure.
Okay. So, we discussed this a bit kanina, so you should review what is Budzinski, what is Kearney. So it's not pain upon flexion of the neck. It's actually movement sa knees pag nag-Budzinski ka. And pag Kearney's, when you move the feet, nag-extend, nag-flex, sorry, nag-flex your neck. So it's not pain, ha? It's not, hindi ba pa yan sa lupa rigidity? Okay? So, ito kasi medyo classic example na wala na masyadong na may meninges talaga. But I think, yun nga, you have to emphasize that you have ARAS involvement because of the decrease in sensorium of the patient. No? Go ahead.
Now for our final diagnosis po, it's also our primary impression, so acute bacterial meningitis. And this one is caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae as presented by the Grandstein result. So to reiterate, so our patient presented the classic triad of bacterial meningitis, the headache, and then the positive within skin and chronic sign. And then also in the CSF, there is an increased protein, increased ICT, and decreased glucose, which points to bacterial meningitis.
Okay.
Next.
So, ano, no? Perfect word na-isolate yung specific na bacteria. But sometimes we could have negative CSI, Ramstein in culture or negative culture, but still have to treat it clinically. Continue. Anong treatment? Sige, prognosis pala, sorry.
Before we proceed po to the treatment. So first for the prognosis, if treated early, most people with meningitis recovers well. And the mortality for bacterial meningitis is around 10 to 15%. And when untreated or if treatment is delayed, meningitis is usually fatal, causing permanent brain damage and death. And the presence of bacteremia, coma, seizures, and concomitant diseases such as alcoholism, DM, multiple myeloma, and head trauma will worsen the prognosis of the patient. Additionally, yung Osler triad po, which is composed of pneumococcal meningitis, pneumonia, and endocarditis, increases the fatality rate of the for the prognosis. And then furthermore, patients who have had meningitis but survived may have neurologic sequelae such as mental impairment, memory or concentration problems, learning disabilities, behavioral problems, double vision, and partial or complete loss of hearing. So for this patient, yung age naman is 34, so better prognosis than elderly patients who may have higher mortality. And absence din po ng comorbidities, so may favorable prognosis din po siya. However, yung level of consciousness is unfavorable. May altered sensorium na, which may point to early a higher morbidity and mortality. And then yung etiology din po is strep pneumoniae. So poor prognosis po siya compared to meningococcal typical meningitis, which is 5% according to Adams. And then yung treatment timing din po delayed because which the patient was initially treated for GERD po. So yeah, that's all po for the prognosis.
Okay. Sige. Actually, next time mag-present, siyempre, una muna yung treatment kasi, for the sake of, anyways. So, yun nga, ngayon, siyempre, in this day and age, konti na lang namamatay sa bacterial meningitis kasi we have antibiotics, we have increased the training of our medical students, our residents, so it's mas na-detect na kasi dati, siyempre, pag resource limited, dati ang hirap diagnose. Pero yun, yeah, it should be ingrained in us because we will see this in our lifetime at least 4 or 5 times. Lalo na kung if you will continue to your medical career to this community. So early treatment is associated. Remember, the earlier that you treat the patient, the lesser chance of serious permanent problems later on. Okay. Every hour that you don't give antibiotics for this patient increases the likelihood of mortality and morbidity. Go ahead.
So for the management, we have the following goals of treatment to be further discussed in the following slides. So number 1 is to stabilize the patient and to support vital functions. Number 2 is to eradicate the infection. Number 3 is to reduce inflammation and to prevent neurologic injury. Number 4 is to prevent complications and recurrence. And number 5 is to promote functional recovery. So next slide. So when managing suspected bacterial meningitis, empiric antibiotics must be started immediately after lumbar puncture. So the timing of the lumbar puncture and CSF analysis is very important. So giving antibiotics before lumbar puncture usually has minimal effects on CSF chemistry and cytology, but it can reduce the yield of the culture. That is why ideally we prefer to get CSF first and then start antibiotics. However, if lumbar puncture is delayed or deferred, it is still essential that empiric antibiotics must not be delayed. So we treat first and then we perform lumbar puncture as soon as it is safe and feasible. So empiric therapy must be guided by the age and the most likely pathogens. So for this case, we have a 34-year-old male with no comorbidities and they are not immunocompromised. So the recommended empiric regimen is a third-generation cephalosporin such as ceftriaxone plus vancomycin with or without ampicillin if there is concern for listeria. And then finally, once we have the culture and susceptibility results, we narrow therapy and shift to the standard targeted treatment for the identified organism. Next slide.
So yeah, before you continue, so just to emphasize, yung sinasabi ni Eliza, that's why it's very important. Kaya I was drilling every one of you kung anong tingin nyo because dito, hindi nyo kailangan ng ELT. Kung pag mukha siyang bacterial meningitis, you have to give it agad. Empiric treatment. No? Kumbaga, kailangan nyo na siya i-shotgun treatment before you do the LT kasi para mas higher yung likelihood na marireverse nyo. Kasi remember this patient, for example, this patient, decrease na yung sensorium niya. Mamaya, pag sepsis na yan, septic shock, no? Mas mahirap ma-pull out yung patient. So, in this case, pwede nyo na siya i-treat agad and then do the diagnostics as you're treating. So, next slide. So, you can continue, Liza.
Okay, for the standard antibiotics, since it is narrowed down by the R labs, it is strep pneumoniae. So the total duration of therapy is 10 to 14 days based on the recovery of the patient. So standard therapy is the penicillin G or ampicillin, which is the penicillin G is 4 million units every 4 hours and ampicillin is 2 grams every 4 hours. So for the alternative therapies, it consists of ceftriaxone and cefodoxime, which is the ceftriaxone is 2 grams every 12 hours and cefodoxime is 2 grams every 4 to 6 hours. So for the resistant strains, we may add vancomycin, which is 15 to 20 milligrams per kilograms every 8 to 12 hours. So next slide. So we may add the corticosteroids to reduce inflammation and to prevent hearing loss and other neurological complications and mortality, since it decreases the possible inflammation of further meningitis.
Okay, but you have to remember, certain cases na ito, not always the case. So many
Especially
times,
on strep pneumonia po daw.
very important kasi baka your classmates will be pero usually this is very specific to certain diseases already also. Only. Yeah, go ahead.
So next slide.
Moving on to supportive management, since meningitis is not only an infectious process but is also an inflammatory one, supportive measures are crucial to reduce morbidity and mortality. So first, we ensure hydration and electrolyte balance to maintain homeostasis. We also prepare to give anticonvulsants if seizures occur. And then to control intracranial pressure, we elevate the head of the bed to 30 degrees and target a PaCO2 of 27 to 30 millimeters of mercury, and in some cases, hyperosmolar therapy, such as oral glycerol, may be used. The overall goal of supportive care is to prevent cerebral herniation and irreversible brainstem injury while keeping the patient hemodynamically stable. Next slide. So for prevention and follow-up, we focus on reducing the risk of recurrence and identifying complications early. First, the patient can be given pneumococcal vaccination after recovery, which includes either the conjugate or polysaccharide vaccine, which has been shown to lower recurrence of risk. And then second, family education is very important. We teach them to recognize warning signs such as fever, severe headache, knuckle rigidity, or altered mental status, and to seek medical attention promptly. Lastly, we emphasize the importance of rehabilitation if neurological sequelae persist. And according to some studies, up to 30 to 50% of survivors of bacterial meningitis may experience long-term complications such as hearing loss, cognitive deficits, motor impairment, or speech problems. That is why we follow up with audiology, neurocognitive testing, and referral to physical, occupational, or speech therapy.
So, in summary, this was a case of acute bacterial meningitis on a 34-year-old male patient presenting with the classic triad of fever, nuchal rigidity, and change in mental status, together with other common symptoms such as vomiting, decreased appetite, and decreased level of consciousness. Acute bacterial meningitis follows the bacterial invasion of the subarachnoid space, causing an inflammatory response in the pia, arachnoid, and the CSF. The presence of the organism causes cytotoxic effects and changes to the blood-brain barrier, cerebral capillary endothelium, as well as cerebral blood flow. Spinal fluid examination via a lumbar puncture is an important part of the diagnosis that would often reveal an elevated fluid pressure, pleocytosis with neutrophilic predominance, very low glucose levels, and elevated protein levels. Imaging such as CT or MRI can be done to visualize the neurological structures. Multiple species of bacteria can cause meningitis, but it is recommended that all cases of acute bacterial meningitis undergo empiric treatment immediately. Specific antibiotic treatment can then follow based on the results of laboratory tests such as gram staining, culture, and AFB to identify the specific pathogen. Supportive care and symptom management is also an integral part of treatment. Likewise, preventive measures such as patient education, vaccination, and follow-up and rehabilitation care are also important.
Okay, so thank you to the presenters. I hope you understand why I ask a lot of questions during and for your ongoing presentation because I just want to drive a point. So you have a patient with most likely bacterial meningitis by history and then I would like to emphasize that in actual practice, you should already treat this patient with empiric treatment. kahit ma-delay yung lumbar puncture, it does not matter. Kasi, kunyari, nabigyan niyo empiric treatment for whatever reason, financial, kasi that's the real life real, that's the reality in the Philippines. So sometimes they don't have any financial capability to do the test. The, the battery of tests siguro, mga sabihin na natin 50,000, 60,000. So parang, this na daw nila gamitin, they would rather, do the empiric treatment all throughout until 14 days. Yeah. So if you are confident with your clinical skills, with your clinical knowledge, then you know that most likely this bacterial meningitis, then you can already treat the patient even without the other tests. So thank you. Hopefully you understand how to localize. No? I want you to practice your localization skills. Your second second long exam period pa lang to na. Tama ba? So with repetition, hopefully everyone will learn. And I am sure you're being taught by your respective preceptors. You're doing preceptors now. Tama ba? Yes. No? You're talking to. Hello? Can you hear me? You're doing your respective preceptorials now. O hindi pa?
Doc, for neuro po, no pa.
Ano pa? Kailan siya mag-start na?
Okay, I'll ask around po, Doc, pero wala pa ata this sem, I think.
Kasi pagkaalala ko, well, I used to be the third year coordinator din a whole year siya. Pero baka may nagbago. Okay. So, yun nga. So that when you go to your neurology preceptors, medyo mas may knowledge na tayo. So, thank you again. So, I hope even the audience was able to listen kung 50% man, no? Kasi naka-off yung camera nila. Hindi ko alam kung kumakain lang ba sila dyan sa gilid. Pero hopefully, most of you were able to listen, to learn. So thank you. If you have any questions, my email is, I'll type my email. You know, and then I just want to emphasize that yun nga, most of the exams will be from my lecture. But also please read the chapters in Adams. Kasi marami doon na mga uncommon na diniscuss doon which you should know also. Okay? So, thank you and have a good day.
Thank you po.